Flight attendant spots an issue with the engine before takeoff, but when she warns others, no one listens. Sarah Johnson felt her heart race as she watched through the terminal window. After 15 years as a flight attendant, she had developed a sharp instinct for sensing when something wasn't right with an aircraft. That's when she saw it. A small dark leak dripping from the right engine of the Boeing 737 she was supposed to board in less than 20 minutes. The fluid dripped unevenly, forming a small puddle on the tarmac at LaGuardia Airport in New York. Sarah rushed through the airport corridors, her crisp navy blue uniform contrasting with the desperation in her brown eyes. She knew she had to act fast. National Air Flight 2847 was scheduled to depart at 2:30 p.m. for Miami, carrying 180 passengers. "Captain Miller!" she shouted, spotting the pilot talking with other crew members near the gate. Captain Robert Miller, a 55-year-old man with a salt and pepper mustache and military bearing, turned with an irritated expression. Sarah reached him, breathless. "Captain, I need to speak with you urgently. There's a leak in the right engine." "Sarah, the mechanics did the standard inspection an hour ago. Everything's in order," he replied curtly, not even glancing in the direction she pointed. "But sir, I saw it with my own eyes. There's fluid leaking and—" "Enough!" Miller cut her off sharply. "You have other responsibilities. Return to your cabin preparations and stop interfering in matters outside your role." Sarah felt a tightness in her chest. Over her years of experience, she had learned to trust her instincts, but she also knew how hard it was to be taken seriously in a male-dominated environment. She turned away, determined to find another way to warn them about the danger. In the corridor leading to the aircraft, she found Barbara Thompson, the flight supervisor, a 50-year-old woman with her hair in a tight bun and an ever-stern expression. "Barbara, we need to talk about the plane. I noticed an issue with the engine and—" "Sarah Johnson," Barbara scolded loudly. "How many times do I have to tell you to stay in your designated area? Your job is to prepare the cabin for boarding, not inspect aircraft. Return to your duties immediately." "But it's a safety concern. I won't tolerate insubordination. One more warning and you'll be suspended. Now go." Sarah swallowed hard and headed toward the plane, but her mind raced. She couldn't just ignore what she'd seen. Lives were at stake. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. As she arranged the safety equipment in the cabin, Sarah glanced out the small side window. The leak was still there, now more visible in the afternoon sun. She needed a different approach. When First Officer Kevin Walker passed through the center aisle, Sarah discreetly approached him. Kevin was a 32-year-old, recently promoted, and always eager to impress his superiors. "Kevin, can I talk to you for a moment?" "Sure, Sarah. What's up?" "I noticed a leak in the right engine. I think we should request another inspection before takeoff." Kevin smiled condescendingly, shaking his head. Sarah, you women always worry too much about noises and little details. The mechanics are trained for this. If there was an issue, they would have caught it." "But I clearly saw fluid dripping. It's probably just normal condensation or leftover cleaning fluid. Don't worry, everything's under control." Kevin continued his walk, leaving Sarah even more frustrated. She looked out the window again and saw Frank Williams, the lead mechanic, walking across the tarmac with his tools. Sarah left the aircraft against orders and ran to Frank. He was a seasoned 62-year-old man with calloused hands and the tired eyes of someone who had seen a lot in life. "Mr. Williams, I need to talk to you." "What is it, girl? Shouldn't you be prepping the cabin?" "I saw a leak in the right turbine. Could you take a look?" Frank stopped and stared at her seriously. For a moment, Sarah saw a shadow of concern in his eyes. "You know, Sarah, I also noticed something odd during this morning's inspection. A little moisture where there shouldn't be any." "Then why did you clear the aircraft?" Frank sighed heavily, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "The pressure is terrible. We've already had 3 delays today and management is breathing down our necks. The supervisor told me if I caused another delay by questioning minor details, I could start looking for another job." But if there's a risk... I know, girl, but I'm 62, with 3 kids still in school, and my retirement doesn't kick in until 65. I can't lose this job now. Sarah felt her world crumbling. Frank had confirmed her suspicions, but the system was stopping them from acting. She returned to the aircraft with a heavy heart, watching as the first passengers began boarding. Among them, she noticed a special group that made her stomach churn even more. About 15 elderly passengers, accompanied by a nurse, all wearing hospital bracelets. Sarah approached the nurse. "Excuse me, are you traveling for a special reason?" "Yes," replied Nancy, the nurse. "These gentlemen and ladies are cancer patients. They're heading to Miami for an experimental treatment that might be their last chance." Sarah felt tears welling in her eyes. These elderly passengers were entrusting their lives to her and the crew. How could she let them take off, knowing the risk? Back in the cockpit, Sarah made one last attempt with Captain Miller. "Captain, please just give me 5 minutes to explain. Sarah," he snapped. "Enough nonsense. If you keep this insubordination up, I'll report you to management immediately. Remember, you've already been warned 3 times this year for questioning standard procedures." Sarah paled. She knew Miller was referring to past incidents, when she'd questioned passenger overloads on turbulent flights and inadequate maintenance on other aircraft. Every time she tried to do her job conscientiously, she was labeled a troublemaker. As she walked down the cabin aisle, an elderly passenger caught her attention. Mrs. Eleanor, a 78-year-old woman with white hair and gentle eyes, lightly touched Sarah's arm. "Sweetheart, are you all right? You look worried." Sarah forced a smile, but Mrs. Eleanor was sharp. "You know, I've traveled a lot in my life. I lost my husband in a plane crash 15 years ago. Since then, I've learned to watch the crew's faces. When they're truly concerned, something isn't right." Mrs. Eleanor's words pierced Sarah's heart like a blade. She couldn't lie to this woman who had already suffered so much. "Mrs. Eleanor, I'm just making sure everything's perfect for your flight. Dear, if something's wrong, you should tell us. We've lived long enough to prefer the truth, even if it's hard to hear." Sarah was torn between her professional duty and her conscience. She gently pulled away and continued her checks, but Mrs. Eleanor's words echoed in her mind. Desperate, Sarah remembered there was a technical manual in the equipment compartment. She had never consulted it directly before, but perhaps she could find information to help her identify exactly the type of failure she suspected. She opened the heavy manual and searched for the section on engine leaks. Her hands trembled as she read, but soon she found exactly what she was looking for. The description matched perfectly what she had observed: a hydraulic fluid leak in the engine compartment area, indicating possible turbine control system failure. Armed with precise technical information, Sarah returned to the cockpit one last time. She found Captain Miller talking to Kevin and decided to approach them both at once. "Captain, I've identified a hydraulic fluid leak in the right engine compartment area. According to the technical manual, this indicates possible turbine control system failure, which could cause..." "That's enough," Miller bellowed. "Kevin, call security. This flight attendant is causing unnecessary panic and needs to be removed from the aircraft." "Captain," Kevin hesitated, "maybe we should at least take a look." "Kevin, do you want your future questioned for supporting a hysterical woman? I remind you that you're the son-in-law of the company president. It would be a shame if he found out you're backing insubordinate employees." Sarah froze. She hadn't known Kevin had family ties to the company's upper management. That explained his recent promotion and why he was so eager to please the captain. "I'm sorry, Sarah," Kevin murmured. "The captain's right. We should follow established protocols." At that moment, the voice of the control tower echoed through the communication system. "Flight 2847, you are cleared for takeoff in 10 minutes. Proceed to runway 35R. Sarah felt pure panic. In 10 minutes, this aircraft with 180 people would be in the air with a potentially catastrophic failure. She had to make a radical decision. With her heart racing, Sarah calmly walked to the cabin's emergency panel. She knew triggering the emergency alarm would force a full evacuation of the aircraft, but she also knew it would mean the end of her career. Thinking of the elderly passengers, especially Mrs. Eleanor, Sarah took a deep breath and discreetly activated the cabin's emergency alarm. Sirens immediately blared throughout the aircraft. Passengers stood up in confusion as emergency lights automatically flashed on. "Attention passengers," the automated voice announced. "Please proceed calmly to the emergency exits. This is a precautionary situation." Captain Miller appeared furiously in the main aisle. "Sarah Johnson, what have you done?" "I activated the safety protocol as my professional conscience guided me." "You've completely lost your mind. Security! Detain this woman immediately." Two airport security guards quickly appeared and escorted Sarah off the aircraft as confused and frightened passengers followed evacuation instructions. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. Sarah was taken to an interrogation room at the airport, where she waited for 2 hours until the airline's general supervisor, Richard Anderson, arrived, accompanied by an aviation safety investigator. "Miss Johnson," Richard began coldly, "you've caused an enormous disruption. This emergency evacuation cost the company thousands of dollars in delays and logistics. I hope you have a very good explanation. I identified a hydraulic fluid leak in the right turbine that poses a real risk to passengers." The investigator, Dr. William Peterson, leaned forward. "Can you describe exactly what you observed?" Sarah detailed everything: the precise location of the leak, the type of fluid, the approximate quantity, and the information she had found in the technical manual. The investigator carefully noted it all down. "We'll verify your claims," said Dr. Peterson. "If you're mistaken, you'll face serious legal consequences for raising a false alarm." As Sarah waited in the room, her mind wandered through all the decisions that had led her to this moment. She thought of her family, her 15-year career, and everything she could lose. But she also thought of the passengers' faces, especially the elderly who had entrusted their lives to her protection. 2 hours later, Dr. Peterson returned to the room with a grave expression. He was accompanied by Frank Williams, the head mechanic, who looked visibly shaken. "Miss Johnson," Dr. Peterson began, "during our investigation, we uncovered something disturbing." Frank stepped forward, tears in his eyes. "Sarah, I need to confess something. During this morning's inspection, a rookie mechanic named Mike was very nervous because he'd already delayed other flights this week. He told me he'd done a full check, but I just found out he skipped several critical steps." Mike admitted he was afraid to report issues because the supervisor had threatened to fire anyone causing further delays. Dr. Peterson continued. "He saw signs of a leak, but chose to ignore it, hoping it was minor." Sarah felt a mix of relief and horror. Relief that she'd been right, horror at how close they'd come to tragedy. "There's more," Dr. Peterson went on. "Our forced inspection revealed not just the leak you identified, but also severe corrosion in critical engine components. If that plane had taken off, there would very likely have been a catastrophic failure at cruising altitude." Frank buried his face in his hands. "Sarah, you saved 180 lives today, and I almost let a tragedy happen because I was afraid of losing my job." Dr. Peterson turned to Sarah with renewed respect. "Miss Johnson, your actions today were heroic. You'll be fully exonerated and recommended for official recognition." Richard Anderson, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "Captain Miller will be temporarily suspended while we investigate how many other similar situations he may have ignored." 3 days later, Sarah returned to the airport to give further statements. In the lobby, she was surprised by a familiar group, the 15 elderly passengers from the flight, accompanied by Mrs. Eleanor. "My dear," Mrs. Eleanor rushed to hug her, "we heard everything. You saved our lives." "Mrs. Eleanor, how are you? Were you able to reschedule your trip for treatment?" "Yes, sweetheart. And you know what's beautiful? After learning of your courage, the 15 of us decided to take action. We started an online petition demanding you be publicly recognized and that the company change its safety practices." One of the men, 82-year-old Mr. Harold, stepped forward with a tablet in hand. "Look here, young lady. Our petition already has 50,000 signatures in 3 days. People are outraged by what you went through and want justice." Sarah was moved to see complete strangers rallying in her defense. The story had gained traction on social media and local news. "You didn't have to do this." "Of course we did," Mrs. Eleanor said. "At our age, we've learned that when someone does the right thing, especially when it's hard, that person deserves protection and honor." That afternoon, Sarah received a call from Dr. Peterson informing her that the investigation had uncovered a troubling pattern. Captain Miller had ignored safety warnings from other employees over the past 8 months, always prioritizing punctuality over precautions. "We've identified at least 5 instances where crew members or mechanics raised legitimate concerns that were dismissed," Dr. Peterson explained over the phone. "Your courage in sounding the alarm not only saved lives immediately, but exposed a serious systemic issue. The investigation also revealed that upper management was pressuring to maintain flight schedules even when it compromised safety procedures. Several employees confirmed receiving veiled threats of termination when questioning operational decisions. Kevin Walker, the co-pilot, requested to meet Sarah in person. They gathered at the airport cafe where he appeared visibly uncomfortable. "Sarah, I need to apologize, not just for not supporting you, but for being complicit in a system that prioritizes appearances over human lives." "Kevin, you were in a difficult position." "No, Sarah, there's no excuse. You showed me what true professional courage looks like. Even knowing you could lose everything, you did what was right." Kevin then revealed something that surprised Sarah. "You know, my family connection to the company president always shielded me from consequences, but it also made me a coward. You inspired me to talk to my father-in-law about real changes in the company." "What are you proposing?" "A new protocol where any employee can request additional inspections without fear of retaliation, and an anonymous reporting system for when superiors pressure unsafe decisions." Sarah was moved by Kevin's transformation. The situation had deeply impacted everyone involved. Barbara Thompson, the supervisor who had reprimanded Sarah, also sought her out days later. She arrived at Sarah's apartment with flowers and tears in her eyes. "Sarah, I came to ask for forgiveness, not just for reprimanding you, but for embodying everything wrong in our profession." "Barbara?" "No, let me speak. In my 15 years as a supervisor, how many important warnings did I ignore because they came from young women like you? How often did I prioritize hierarchy over intuition and experience?" Barbara explained she had reflected deeply on her unconscious biases. "Did you know I started as a flight attendant 25 years ago? I remember how frustrating it was not to be taken seriously, but instead of fighting to change the system, I adapted to it. I became part of the problem." "What matters is recognizing it and changing," Sarah replied gently. "That's why I'm here. I want to propose you as my successor when I retire next year. But more than that, I want your help transforming how we supervise our team." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. 3 weeks after the incident, Sarah was officially summoned to a meeting with the company's new board. The fallout had forced significant leadership changes, including the dismissal of several executives complicit in unsafe practices. The new company president, Dr. Elizabeth Parker, was an aeronautical engineer with extensive aviation safety experience. She greeted Sarah in her office with evident respect and admiration. "Miss Johnson, your courage didn't just save lives. It forced this company to confront problems ignored for years." "Dr. Parker, I just did my job." "No, Sarah. You did far more than your job. You demonstrated true leadership in a critical moment. That's why I'd like you to lead our new participatory safety program." Sarah was stunned. "How would this program work?" "We want a system where every employee's experience and observations are valued, regardless of hierarchy. You would be responsible for training supervisors, pilots, and mechanics on how to listen to and investigate concerns raised by the team." The offer was tempting, but Sarah had doubts. "And if I accept, will I have real authority to implement changes?" "Absolutely. You'll report directly to me and have an independent budget for your initiatives. Plus, any safety-related decision you make will be final and non-negotiable." Sarah thought about the last 15 years of frustration, all the times she'd been silenced or ignored. Now she had the chance to transform the system from the inside out. I accept, on one condition. What is it? I want Frank Williams as my lead assistant. He has the technical expertise and now understands the importance of prioritizing safety over external pressures. Done. In the months that followed, Sarah worked tirelessly to implement the new program. She organized workshops where pilots, flight attendants, and mechanics learned to communicate concerns effectively. And more importantly, where supervisors learned to listen without bias. Frank proved to be a dedicated partner, using his experience to identify blind spots in new mechanics training. Together, they developed a mentorship system where veterans taught newcomers not just techniques, but also the courage to speak up when needed. Kevin Walker became an enthusiastic advocate for the changes, using his position to encourage other pilots to adopt a more collaborative culture. He often shared Sarah's story with new crew members, emphasizing how her bravery had saved lives. Barbara, true to her promise of change, became a completely different supervisor. She instituted weekly meetings where any team member could raise concerns without fear of retaliation. The company also implemented a special protocol allowing any employee to request additional aircraft inspections without needing to justify their reasons. Employees nicknamed it the Sarah Protocol. During one such inspection, requested by a young flight attendant, an electrical issue was discovered that could have caused navigation system failure. The flight attendant was publicly praised, reinforcing the company's new culture. 6 months after the original incident, Sarah received a special invitation. The 15 elderly passengers she'd saved wanted to organize a recognition ceremony at the airport. They'd coordinated with the company and local authorities to create an event honoring not just Sarah, but all employees who put safety first. On the day of the ceremony, Sarah arrived at the airport and was moved by what she saw. Hundreds of people were there. Company employees, family members of the passengers she'd saved, representatives from other airlines, and even government officials. Mrs. Eleanor, now in good health after successfully completing her medical treatment, was the first to speak. "My dear Sarah, when I met you that day, I saw fear in your eyes, but I also saw determination. You reminded me of myself when I was young, fighting to be heard in a world that didn't value our voices." Mrs. Eleanor's voice trembled with emotion. "You didn't just save our lives. You gave us more time with our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. You gave us the chance to see another sunrise, to hug our loved ones one more time." Mr. Harold took the microphone next. "Sarah, I'm 82 years old. I lived through World War II, saw the country change, raised 8 kids, and have 15 grandchildren. But I can honestly say few people have impressed me as much as you did that day." He paused, looking directly at Sarah. "You know what moves me the most? It's not just that you saved us. It's just that you showed how an ordinary person, doing their job with conscience and courage, can transform an entire system. You proved we don't need to be movie heroes to make a difference." Dr. Peterson, the aviation safety investigator, also spoke. "The case of flight attendant Sarah Johnson will become mandatory study material in all aviation safety courses across the country. She demonstrated that true safety comes from people who have the courage to question authority when necessary. More importantly," he continued, "her actions led to changes in other airlines too. The Sarah Protocol has been adopted by 5 competing carriers. We can say she saved far more than 180 lives that day." Frank Williams, now in a quality supervisor role, spoke about how his own life had changed. "Sarah taught me that experience without courage is useless. I had the knowledge to identify the problem, but I didn't have the courage to face the consequences of doing what was right. She showed me that our responsibility goes beyond following orders. Now at 62, I feel like I'm finally doing the work I always should have done, and that's thanks to the courage of a young woman who refused to stay silent." When it was Sarah's turn to speak, she was visibly emotional. She looked at the crowd and saw faces representing all the progress that had been made. "When I pulled that alarm, I thought I was ending my career. I never imagined I was starting a movement. I want to dedicate this recognition to every professional who has ever questioned a decision that seemed wrong, even knowing they might face consequences. and especially to the women working in environments where their voices aren't always valued. Sarah paused, looking directly at Mrs. Eleanor. Mrs. Eleanor, you told me that day that people from your generation prefer the truth, even when it's hard. That gave me the courage to do what was necessary. Your experience and wisdom inspired me to fight for what was right. And I want every young professional to know, trust your instincts, speak up when something doesn't feel right, and remember, doing the right thing may require temporary sacrifices, but it's always worth it in the long run. The ceremony ended with a special surprise. The company announced the creation of an annual scholarship called the Sarah Johnson Scholarship for young women pursuing careers in aviation. The scholarship would include not just financial support, but also mentorship focused on leadership and professional courage. Mrs. Eleanor approached Sarah after the ceremony. My dear, can I tell you a secret? Of course, Mrs. Eleanor. That day on the plane, when I saw your concern, I knew you were special. My gut told me you'd do the right thing no matter the cost. That's why I stayed calm during the evacuation. I knew I was in good hands. Have you always had that much faith? You know, Sarah, when you've lived as long as I have, you learn to recognize true souls. And you, my dear, are a true soul. 2 years after the incident, Sarah had become a national reference in aviation safety. She was frequently invited to speak at universities and international conferences, always emphasizing that safety comes from the courage of ordinary individuals. The airline had completely transformed. They implemented the strictest safety program in the country and became leaders in nearly every safety metric. Ironically, this obsession with safety had also improved their operational efficiency, proving that doing the right thing was also good for business. Frank, now nearing retirement, had found a new passion, training young mechanics not just in technique but in professional ethics. He often said that Sarah had given him the best years of his career. Kevin had been promoted to captain and specialized in pilot safety programs. He used his personal experience to teach others about the importance of listening to the entire team, regardless of hierarchy. Barbara had become the Director of Human Resources, focusing specifically on creating work environments where employees felt safe to express concerns. She often referred to Sarah as the person who taught me the difference between leading and bossing people around. One Friday afternoon, Sarah was in her office when she received a special call. It was Mrs. Eleanor. Sarah, dear, remember I had that follow-up medical appointment today? Of course, Mrs. Eleanor. How did it go? The doctors said I'm completely cured, 2 years with no signs of the disease. Do you know what that means? Sarah smiled, knowing what was coming next. That you'll have more time with your family. Exactly, and you know what else? My youngest grandson is studying aeronautical engineering. He said he wants to work in aviation safety because he was inspired by your story. Mrs. Eleanor, that's wonderful. Sarah, I'm 80 years old now. I've lived a long life and learned that the moments that matter most are when someone makes a difference in others' lives. You made a difference in so many lives, including mine. That evening, Sarah reflected on how her life had changed. She thought about the fear she felt when she triggered that alarm, the uncertainty about her future, the criticism she faced. But she also thought of the passengers' faces, especially the elderly who now had more time with their families. She thought of the changes she had implemented, the employees who now felt safe to speak up, the lives that could be saved in the future because of the transformations sparked by her courage. Sarah looked out the window of her apartment and saw a plane passing high in the night sky. She smiled, knowing that somewhere in that aircraft a team was working together, where every voice was valued and every concern was taken seriously. The following Monday, Sarah received an unexpected proposal. The Federal Aviation Administration wanted to invite her to lead a national aviation safety program to be implemented across all airlines in the country. This would be an opportunity to expand the impact of your work to all of U.S. aviation, the administrator explained during the meeting. Sarah carefully considered the offer. It would mean leaving the company where she had built so much, but it also represented the chance to positively influence the entire industry. I accept on one condition, she replied, echoing her answer years earlier to Dr. Parker. What would that be? I want to form a team with people who've lived through experiences like mine. Frank Williams, Kevin Walker, Barbara Thompson, and others who've truly understood the value of prioritizing awareness over convenience. That can be arranged. Months later, the national program launched with great fanfare. Sarah traveled across the country, visiting large and small airports, speaking with employees at every level. At each stop, she shared her story, not as a hero, but as proof that anyone can make a difference when they act with courage and awareness. She always emphasized that true heroism isn't about making easy decisions, but doing what's right even when it's hard. During one of her trips, Sarah visited a small airport in rural Pennsylvania. There she met Ashley, a 25-year-old flight attendant facing a similar situation. She had identified a maintenance issue, but her superiors were ignoring her concerns. "Sarah, I'm scared," Ashley confessed. "If I push too hard, I could lose my job. But if I do nothing..." "Ashley, let me tell you something. The fear you're feeling right now is exactly what I felt 3 years ago. But do you know the difference between fear and cowardice?" "I don't." Cowardice is letting fear stop you from doing what's right. Courage is feeling afraid and doing what's right anyway. Sarah spent the entire day with Ashley, teaching her how to properly document her concerns, how to communicate effectively with superiors, and most importantly, how to use the new whistleblower channels that now existed to protect employees like her. "And remember," Sarah said as she said goodbye, "you're not alone. We now have a nationwide network of professionals committed to safety. If your company won't listen, we will." 6 months later, Sarah received a call from Ashley. Her persistence had led to the discovery of a major issue that was corrected before it could cause harm. The young flight attendant had been promoted to safety instructor at her company. "Sarah, you saved my career and probably many lives. How can I thank you?" By doing the same for someone else when it's your turn, the cycle of courage continues when each person helps the next. In her 3rd year leading the national program, Sarah received the highest recognition of her career. She was invited to speak at the International Civil Aviation Organization Assembly in Montreal. There, she presented the results of the US program, a 40% reduction in safety incidents, a 60% increase in voluntary reports of potential issues, and 0 fatal accidents related to problems that could have been identified earlier by staff. "The secret," she told the international delegates, "isn't more advanced technology or stricter regulations. The secret is creating cultures where everyone feels responsible for safety and has the courage to act when needed." After her presentation, Sarah was approached by delegates from several countries interested in implementing similar programs. The Sarah Johnson model began to be studied and adapted internationally. Back in the United States, Sarah visited LaGuardia Airport again, where it had all begun. She walked to the exact window where she had observed the turbine leak 3 years earlier. Now in the same spot, she saw mechanics working methodically, unhurried, checking every detail. She saw pilots respectfully discussing minor concerns with flight attendants. She saw supervisors listening carefully to junior employees. There, where a tragedy had nearly occurred, now stood a global example of aviation safety. That afternoon, Sarah took her final flight as a flight attendant before dedicating herself fully to consulting and education. The flight was special. It carried another group of elderly passengers for medical treatment, including Mrs. Eleanor, who now accompanied other patients as a volunteer. "Sarah, dear," Mrs. Eleanor said during the flight, "may I ask you a personal question?" "Of course." "Have you ever regretted the decision you made that day?" Sarah looked out the airplane window, seeing white clouds and the endless blue sky. "Mrs. Eleanor, in the hardest moments, when I faced criticism and when my career was uncertain, there were moments of doubt, but never regret. Why? Because I've learned that I can sleep peacefully, knowing I always do what I believe is right. And that's worth more than any job security or social approval." "I knew you'd say that," Mrs. Eleanor smiled. "People like you are born with something special, the inability to ignore their conscience." During that flight, Sarah watched her team working harmoniously. The captain regularly consulted the crew on their observations, The mechanics had not only completed the standard inspection, but also several additional checks requested by different team members. At the end of the flight, when the passengers safely disembarked at their destination, Sarah knew she had found her true purpose, not just to work in aviation, but to transform how people work in aviation. Years later, when Sarah became a global reference in aviation safety and organizational culture, she often looked back on that afternoon at LaGuardia, not as a traumatic moment, but as the day she discovered that an ordinary person, armed only with awareness and courage, could change the world. In her talks, she always ended with the same reflection. We all face moments where we must choose between what's easy and what's right. The difference between ordinary people and extraordinary ones isn't talent or luck. It's simply the consistent choice to do what's right, even when it's hard. And remember, you never know how many lives you might touch by making that choice. I thought I was saving 180 passengers. Turns out, I was transforming an entire industry. End of story. Now, dear listener, tell us, would you do the same as Sarah in that situation? Subscribe to the channel and leave your thoughts about this story of courage in the comments.